So the temporal lobe is one of the smallest parts of the brain, yet it has some of the most important functions. It's located near the ears above your cheekbones, and its main functions involve controlling memory, speech, and comprehension, which are incredibly important on a daily basis because we use those three functions every single day. Additionally, the temporal lobe contributes to a person's ability to speak multiple languages. However, if damage were to occur, cognitive abilities can be compromised, and different disorders that involve seizures and hallucinations can occur. In order to send and receive certain actions or responses, chemical signals pass from certain structures within the temporal lobe to the body. So, two very important structures within the temporal lobe are the hippocampus, which is located right here, and the amygdala, which is located kind of next to it right over here. So both of these structures contribute to memory storage. However, hippocampus is more long-term memory storage. Additionally, the hippocampus contributes to spatial awareness. So if you've ever been somewhere out in public and someone's getting a bit too close to you, there's a signal being sent from your brain to your body saying like, okay, like get away from this person, they're getting too close. The hippocampus is what's sending that signal. And then the amygdala contributes to a lot of emotional responses and reflexes. So if someone does something to you, your amygdala tells you like whether to be happy or sad or to get angry. So it kind of contributes to how we act in public. So back to what I said earlier about language being incredibly important. The temporal lobe controls much of what we as people understand as languages. The temporal lobe is able to store information from practice languages, and we're able to use them in our everyday lives. For example, this writing below, right over here, that I just underlined in blue, probably looks like a ton of squiggles and dots to most of you. But to me, I can actually read it. This is Arabic, which is one of the languages I speak. And obviously to you guys, it kind of just looks like a ton of random squiggles everywhere. But for me, I can read that it says, I like ice cream. So although it doesn't look like the way we would read I like ice cream, my temporal lobe, due to the amount of times I've practiced language, is able to tell me that these two things translate to exactly the same phrase or sentence. So as with any part of the brain, disorders and damages can occur. So one of the biggest disorders of the temporal lobe is temporal lobe epilepsy. It's typically hereditary, but it can occur if there is incredibly severe trauma to the temporal lobe. And what happens when someone suffers from this is they get hallucinations, seizures, or temporary amnesia. And all of these things come directly from the temporal lobe. They're all kind of like counteractions to what the temporal lobe typically does. Another big thing from the temporal lobe is hearing loss or memory loss. Both of these things can be affected if there is severe trauma or damage, such as like from a car accident or if you hit your head somewhere really hard. And with both of these, they are impacted by the amygdala and the hippocampus. If either of those are damaged, then both of these functions may not work as well as they used to because they're severely damaged. So they are not able to send certain signals, they're not able to receive certain signals, which ultimately leads to plenty of issues for the person or patient. So as you can see in this bottom picture here, this big black hollow area is where there's severe head trauma, and it's on the patient's, left side of their head. So most likely their temporal lobe will be impacted and they can experience either memory loss, hearing loss, or some form of seizures or hallucinations depending on the nature of their damage. So over time, there have been a few experiments done on the temporal lobe. So in 1994, 4 scientists wanted to discover what triggered the hallucinations in the temporal lobe. So they took a few patients, of course with their consent, and they stimulated the neocortex, which is a certain part of the brain that triggers hallucinations. And they would trigger that part of the brain and kind of observe what caused hallucinations, which led them to understand kind of how the temporal lobe played a part in when someone had a hallucination or they had a seizure, basically to better understand temporal lobe epilepsy. In 1998, a few years later, 3 scientists decided to use monkeys to understand how the temporal lobe participates in reflexes. And so with this, they would stimulate different parts of the brain or put the monkeys in certain situations to see what the brain, specifically the temporal lobe, would do. This eventually led them to have a better understanding of depth perception, which is relating to spatial awareness.